In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on December 23, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Kentucky versus Bellarmine. This matchup in Lexington looks like a mismatch on paper, and that is exactly why the spread is so silly big for a casual fan to process. Kentucky is rolling in at 8-4, 7-1 at home, fresh off a statement win over a ranked St. John's team in Atlanta, and they finally have their full rotation available again. You can feel the mood around the program shifting, the defense is sharper, the rotations make more sense, and they are starting to lean into being a team that takes pride in squeezing the life out of opponents rather than just racing them in a track meet. That is all real. But a spread creeping into the mid-30s turns the question from who wins to how much do they actually care about the final margin once this thing is in hand. Here is the thing that matters for a number that large. Covering a mid-30s spread is not just about being better, it is about stacking focus for 40 minutes, keeping the main guys on the floor deeper into the second half than common sense would recommend, and avoiding those natural human let-ups that creep in during a sleepy holiday home game. This is a 1 p.m. tip in Rupp, right after an emotional marquee win and right before the real meat of SEC play starts, and you do not need a spreadsheet to guess where Kentucky's mental energy is going to be most of the time this week. They want the win, they want to stay healthy, and they would love to get the backups and young pieces some real minutes in a stress-free environment. That is a beautiful recipe for a comfortable victory that still leaves a back door wide open for the underdog to sneak through late. Now flip it around and look at Bellarmine's side of this story. Their record says 5-6 and 1-4 away from home, so on the surface it is just another bye game. But the way they play does not scream easy cover for a favorite laying more than 5 touchdowns worth of points. They live in that old school, read and react half-court world with constant cutting, backdoor action, and ball movement chasing high-quality shots rather than hero ball isolations. The numbers back that feel up. They are shooting better than 50% from the field and over 80% at the line this season, which tells you their possessions usually end with a clean look or a trip to the stripe instead of random nonsense. That kind of discipline is annoying for a big favorite that just wants to turn the game into a highlight show and get out of there. You can also feel that this program still carries the identity it built in recent years, even with a first-year head coach on the sideline now. They are not going to wow you with length or vertical pop, but they are smart, they cut hard, and they will happily run 20 seconds off the clock to force Kentucky's defenders to stay locked in possession after possession. If Kentucky has any stretches where the communication dips or the closeouts get a little lazy, Bellarmine is the type of opponent that punishes that with backdoor cuts and slip screens instead of just chucking contested jumpers. And on the other end, while Kentucky absolutely has a size and athletic advantage, Bellarmine's spacing and shooting mean those big Kentucky bodies can get pulled away from the rim, which can at least blunt the every possession is a layup or putback nightmare that usually kills underdogs in this price range. The other layer here is tempo and rotation. Kentucky is not playing wild, reckless pace for 40 minutes. They are more selective now, picking their spots to run while trusting their half-court defense to handle most of the work. When you combine that with a deep rotation where Pope can comfortably go 10 deep, you are inviting more lineups where the chemistry is a bit looser and the urgency drops once the scoreboard looks safe. Bellarmine, on the other hand, is perfectly fine grinding their way through possessions, managing the ball, and valuing each trip as if they are shaving seconds off the game clock along with the score. All of that quietly tilts this matchup toward Kentucky wins by a lot, but not necessarily by as much as the number is asking them to. So when you put it all together, the more realistic picture is Kentucky controlling the game, maybe leading by mid-teens at half and stretching it into the mid-20s or low 30s after the break, while Bellarmine keeps running their stuff, keeps making enough shots, and takes advantage of a softer final few minutes against reserves who are more interested in getting shots up than winning by 40. As our first pick for this matchup, the Bellarmine Knights to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The books hanging a total in the mid-150s are basically saying, expect something like Kentucky in the high 80s or low 90s and Bellarmine hanging around in the low to mid-60s. That is not as crazy as it sounds when you look at how these two teams are trending right now. Kentucky is averaging in the mid-80s per night, and they just dropped 53 points in the second half alone against a ranked St. John's team that is not exactly soft on defense. This is an offense that can turn a 3 or 4 minute stretch into a 15-2 run without even blinking if they string together stops and leakouts. Defensively, Kentucky has earned the hype this month, and that does complicate things a bit for an over. They held St. John's to 66 and 33% from the field, and there is a clear pattern in their own notes. When they hold opponents to 66 or fewer, they are undefeated under this staff, including this season. So you have this tension, a team that could realistically win games in the 70s with defense or in the 90s with a scoring binge, and your job as a bettor is guessing which version shows up in a particular spot. Here, against a smaller mid-major with a spread in the mid-30s, the game script actually nudges us toward the more free-flowing version showing up for longer stretches. Bellarmine adds some interesting texture to that picture. They are not a walk-it-up-and-hold-the-ball like it is 1994 kind of slow team. They are more of a run-good offense, get a great shot, and trust our shooting group. Their season line points that way, scoring around 78 a night and giving up about 77, which tells you their games are not low-scoring rock fights even when the pace is controlled. They shoot a strong percentage from the field, and they are one of the more reliable free-throw shooting teams you are going to see in this underdog price range, which matters because points with the clock stopped are gold for any over. If they can just reach something in that 60 to low 70s band, they are doing their part in a game where Kentucky has every reason and every tool to get into the high 80s or beyond. There is also the blowout factor, which is easy to overlook but huge for totals. In tight games, coaches squeeze rotations, every possession slows down, and nerves drag the pace back toward caution. In games like this, once a favorite opens up a big cushion, the whole vibe changes, defenses relax a touch, and benches come in hunting their own moments. Kentucky's depth is not made up of walk-ons who just want to stand in the corner. There are real scorers in that second unit who will push the ball, attack the rim, and fire from three if the game is out of reach on the scoreboard. Bellarmine's side, if they are trailing by a big number late, is also more likely to keep running their normal offense instead of dribbling out the clock because these are real developmental reps for them and the shots they get still matter on film. When you match that dynamic with the actual scoring profiles we have seen, Kentucky's last 5 are stuffed with totals that jump off the page. One game soaring into triple digits for Kentucky, others landing near or above what this number projects, and Bellarmine has its own set of high-scoring outings with scores sitting in the mid to high 70s on both sides. It does not mean there is no path to a slog. You could always get an icy shooting day or whistles that stall the rhythm, and that is the speculative part of any over conversation. But the more reasonable scenario here is a game that breathes, where both teams find enough offense in different phases to keep the scoreboard climbing all afternoon. So if you picture a final score in that neighborhood where Kentucky is somewhere in the high 80s or low 90s, and Bellarmine is living in the low or even mid-60s, you land right in the pocket where this thing can clear the number with a bit of room to spare, especially if garbage time turns into a track meet between bench units rather than a handshake line in slow motion. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Florida Atlantic versus UCF. UCF and Florida Atlantic are not just sneaking off to some random neutral gym. They are playing this one at Disney at the Holiday Festival inside ESPN-wide World of Sports. So you get tournament vibes, but in a setting that feels more like a theme park field trip than a true road game. That matters because it strips away most of the usual home court noise and turns this into a cleaner question. Who handles a neutral floor, strange shooting backdrops, and that everybody's hanging around the resort energy better? On the surface, the story feels simple. UCF walks in sitting at 10-1 with a 9-game win streak and that absurd performance where they knocked down 19 threes in a 102-80 win over Florida Gulf Coast. Florida Atlantic, on the other hand, shows up at 8-4, still feeling that 88-75 loss at St. Mary's that reminded them how punishing a disciplined half-court team can be. The line reflects that resume gap pretty clearly, with UCF laying a healthy number in the range of about 8.5 points and the market treating them like the polished high major, while Florida Atlantic is slotted into the scrappy and state underdog role almost by default. Honestly, that is the easy reading, the kind of thing you see in a scrolling ticker and accept without thinking twice. Here is where it gets more interesting. Florida Atlantic is not playing like some plucky mid-major just happy to be here. They are scoring in the low 80s on average, giving up low 70s, and protecting the rim at a rate that lands them around the top 15 nationally in blocks per game. That is not just a number. It means a lot of would-be easy layups turn into volleyball spikes off the glass, which often flips straight into transition. UCF is more explosive by raw scoring. They are living in the high 80s on offense and mid-70s allowed, and they do it with a style that feels like someone cranked every offensive slider up. They shoot it very well from the field. They sit around 40% from three, which is in that top tier nationally, and they absolutely crash the offensive glass, pulling something like 15 extra boards a night and ranking near the top of Division I in offensive rebounding rate. If you are laying a big favorite, that profile usually feels great. But when you are asking that favorite to clear a sizable spread against a team that blocks shots, has length, and has enough scoring of its own, that same profile can turn into a high-wire act. Tempo-wise, both teams sit right around national average. UCF is just above 73 possessions per 40 minutes, Florida Atlantic a touch below 72. So we are not talking about a pure track meet with 80-plus trips each way where the favorite can just slowly open the gap through volume. UCF's record also has a certain comfort to it. They have piled wins at home, grabbed a road result, and shown they can handle a neutral court, but a lot of that came with them in the driver's seat in terms of situation. Florida Atlantic just spent time on the West Coast, got smacked a bit by St. Mary's, and flew back with a clearer understanding of what gets exposed when they are a little loose in half-court execution. Weirdly, that kind of loss can be useful. You get film, you get urgency, and you get that little sting that keeps you locked in for the next big non-conference showcase. There is also the shape of this roster and staff. Florida Atlantic is in year 2 of this coaching era. The identity is still getting polished, but the blueprint is clear enough. They lean into multiple ball handlers, a front court with real shot challenging ability, and international size that makes it hard for anyone, even a glass-eating group like UCF, to simply bully their way to every rebound. This is not just about systems either, it is also about memory. These teams saw each other last season, and that game turned into a 100-94 shootout that UCF took. You do not have to be inside the locker room to guess there is at least a little "we owe them one" hanging in the air for Florida Atlantic. That kind of emotional edge is always speculative, but it is a very normal human response after dropping a high-scoring game like that. Health-wise, public reports do not show any obvious, confirmed absence for UCF coming into this matchup, which means we treat them as close to full strength unless something changes very late. Florida Atlantic has had at least one rotation big pop-up with a foot issue and those game-time style tags that make bettors and coaches twitch a bit. The key thing here is that you cannot build a handicap assuming he plays heavy minutes or does not play at all. You treat his situation as a bonus if he looks fully available, not as a foundation. So when you put all that together in this neutral resort setting, you have a favorite that leans on high-variance weapons like hot three-point shooting and overwhelming offensive rebounding, and an underdog that can challenge shots, run enough offense to keep trading punches, and has recent experience getting tested on the road. It looks less like an automatic double-digit cruise and more like one of those games where the underdog keeps answering just enough to stay in shouting distance, possession after possession. That game's script is, of course, a projection based on current form and style, not a guarantee, but it is the lens that fits this specific matchup the best right now. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida Atlantic Owls to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Sitting in the low 160s, roughly around 163 points at a lot of books, it is basically the market saying, expect fireworks, and not the cheap kind. On paper, that sounds bold, but it is not pulled from thin air. Florida Atlantic's offense is living in the low 80s per game while their defense gives up low 70s. UCF is living even higher, scoring in the high 80s and allowing just under mid-70s. When two teams with those kinds of scoring profiles share a neutral court and play at a tempo that is roughly average nationally, mid-70s in possessions combined, you do not need absurd speed to reach a very high total. You just need a couple of stretches where both sides trade efficient trips. Here is the thing, UCF's offensive personality is basically tailor-made for a big total. They shoot the ball very well from the field in general, they hit threes at around a 40% clip, and they do not accept one-shot possessions easily because of how hard they hit the offensive glass. A missed jumper for them is often just the start of the possession, not the end. Florida Atlantic counters with rim protection. You might think that screams under, but shot blocking has a funny way of pushing scores up. Every time you reject a drive or force a weird angle inside, you invite broken floor opportunities and early offense the other way. Those sequences are hard to defend because matchups are scrambled and defenders are backpedaling instead of set. We have already seen what happens when these two share a court and both have their offensive tools working. Last season's meeting finished 100-94 in favor of UCF, a game that did not just sneak over typical totals, it blew them away. That does not mean this meeting repeats that exact script, but it does give you a real-world example of what their styles can produce when the game opens up. Recent results this season point in the same direction. UCF's latest outing was that 102-80 result, which cleared 180 combined. Florida Atlantic's most recent game ended 88-75, landing right on 163. So both teams bring very fresh memories of high-scoring contests where their offensive strengths and sometimes defensive lapses lived on every possession. Layer the setting on top of that. This is a non-conference finale at a neutral site inside a resort environment, not a grindy January league game where every possession feels like a tax audit. Players are often a little looser in these events. Coaches are more willing to lean into what their group does best instead of playing it safe for conference tiebreakers. You might even see a slightly friendlier whistle, which, to be fair, is speculation, but it fits how these showcase-style games often feel to viewers. More freedom, more flow, fewer long stretches of half-court stalemates. When you combine the verified scoring averages, the shared tendency to live in high-scoring game environments, the three-point volume and accuracy on the UCF side, and the rim protection that can actually fuel transition for Florida Atlantic, you get a matchup that has a lot of ways to climb past a lofty total. One decent run of hot shooting, or a few minutes of trading quick scores, can turn a comfortable pace game into something where both teams are suddenly flirting with the mid-80s by the final horn. That exact outcome is still a projection, not a promise, but with everything we know right now, leaning toward more points rather than fewer makes sense. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Idaho versus California State Bakersfield. Idaho rolls into this one with a very clear identity, a team that is perfectly happy to space the floor, let it fly from deep, and dare you to keep pace for the full 40 minutes. They are scoring in the low 80s per game while giving up low 70s, so their typical night looks like a scoreboard that never really cools off. The way they get there is what matters for this matchup, a very modern shot profile built around heavy three-point volume. Around double-digit makes a night on roughly 30 or so attempts, and a healthy mid-30s percentage from beyond the arc that forces defenses to stretch until something finally snaps. It is not just we shoot threes because they are trendy, it is more like this is who we are, and you can either live with it or get run off your own floor. On the other side, Cal State Bakersfield lives a much more stressful offensive life. They sit in the low 70s on offense and the high 70s on defense, so most of their games feel like trying to hold water in a leaky bucket rather than trading clean punches. The efficiency gap shows up in the shooting, with Bakersfield sitting around 42% from the field and under 28% from deep, which is not exactly the recipe for a smooth half-court operation. Instead, they lean into the gritty stuff, offensive boards, physical drives, and a steady parade to the free throw line, hoping that hustle and whistles can cover up what the jump shot cannot. That approach can absolutely bother some opponents, but it works best when the other side is sloppy on the glass or uncomfortable with physicality, and Idaho has quietly built a profile that cuts against that. Idaho's rebounding numbers point to a group that holds its own around the rim, pulling down well over 35 boards per game while holding opponents a few boards lower, which makes it a lot harder for a team like Bakersfield to live on second chances. If your offense already struggles to score efficiently and you are not getting extra possessions off the glass, suddenly every empty trip feels twice as heavy. Layer on the fact that Idaho walks in at 8-4 with a real sense of rhythm, Bakersfield sits at 5-8 still searching for a consistent formula, and the market is hanging a short road number of Idaho -4.5, and you can see why the analytical arrows tend to point in one very specific direction against the spread. As our first pick for this matchup, the Idaho Vandals to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The total is sitting around 151.5, and when you peek at how these two teams usually play, that number starts to look more like a suggestion than a ceiling. Idaho's games are living in the mid-150s in combined scoring, thanks to that blend of high-volume threes, aggressive offense, and a defense that is good but not suffocating, which keeps games open rather than grinding them into the 60s. Bakersfield's games are not exactly quiet either. They score in the low 70s but give up close to 80 a night, so their average box score also lands in that 150-plus neighborhood. Here is the thing, the way these teams generate points lines up in a way that is very friendly to an over ticket. Idaho wants threes, lots of them, and they have been hitting at a respectable clip while also converting at the free throw line in the mid-70% range, so when defenses overreact to the perimeter, they are perfectly happy to march to the stripe. Bakersfield might not shoot it well from outside, but they crank the free throw volume way up. Their ratio of free throw attempts to field goal attempts sits close to half, which is a polite way of saying they create a whole lot of contact and whistles. From a total perspective, that is gold, because nothing juices scoring like a game where the clock keeps stopping and both teams are adding points with no time coming off. You also get a fun little twist with Bakersfield's shot blocking. They are averaging right around 6 blocks per game, which is a big number, and blocks tend to do two things. They erase an easy two on one end and then create fast break chaos on the other, sometimes in the same 5-second span. So you have Idaho bombing away from three, Bakersfield sending back shots and trying to run off those plays, and both teams living at the line. That is not exactly the blueprint for a slow, methodical rock fight. And when the posted total is a touch lower than what their combined season scoring profiles suggest, it nudges you toward expecting a game that looks more like a holiday track meet than a sleepy mid-December slog. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Villanova versus Seton Hall. Walking into this matchup, the number on the board is basically telling you a story. Villanova is getting a couple of points on the road. Seton Hall is treated like the scarier team in their own gym, and the total is sitting right around 130 points as of December 23, 2025. On the surface, you can see why the books shaded it that way. Seton Hall is sitting at 11-1-0 overall, a perfect 7-0-0 at home, fresh off a tough-minded win at Providence, and this is the same group everyone expected to prop up the Big East standings from the bottom. Instead, they have spent the first 6 weeks pretending they belong in every top 25 conversation. Here is the thing though, if you pull the camera back a bit, the shine is real but it is also carefully lit. 7 of those 11 wins have come against the softest parts of the schedule, and most of the happy nights have been right there in their own building. It is not fraudulent, it is just curated, like a very flattering Instagram angle that does not quite show the messy kitchen. Villanova, on the other hand, is only 9-2-0, which looks calmer on a standings line, but the path has had more potholes. They just wrapped non-conference play by flying out to Milwaukee and outlasting Wisconsin in overtime, and that came after already taking a punch on the road at Michigan and threading their way through the emotional weirdness of the Big Five in Philly. They have had to win games that felt more like mid-March tests than December tune-ups. The predictive stuff quietly backs that up. If you look at the efficiency models, the numbers grade these two as near equals, with a subtle tilt toward Villanova. So while the win-loss records and that shiny home mark scream Pirates juggernaut, the efficiency sheets whisper, careful, these teams are closer than they look. Now layer the styles on top of that. Villanova plays at one of the slowest tempos in the country, and it shows. They want half-court possessions, spacing, and threes, not a 94-foot sprint. Their games can feel like job interviews, every possession scripted, everyone judged. Seton Hall is comfortable grinding too, leaning on physicality and defense more than fireworks. When both teams protect the ball and value each trip, margins tend to shrink into 1 or 2 possession rock fights instead of 10-point avalanches. That is exactly where a short underdog becomes more interesting. Getting a possession or two of cushion in a game that naturally drags into a slower rhythm is like walking into a tight parking space with a compact car instead of a pickup. It does not guarantee success, but the math feels a lot friendlier. And then there is the human piece. Kevin Willard is walking back into the building where he built his name, now wearing Villanova gear and steering a disciplined, top-tier program that already knows how to win ugly in tough gyms. Across from him is a Seton Hall team that has rocketed past expectations so fast that the resume is still trying to catch up to the buzz. On nights like this, with familiarity on both benches and pressure cranked up on the surprise contender, the game often drifts toward that pretty record, uncomfortable night script. In a slow, possession-starved environment, where both coaches know each other's preferences almost too well, the side that has already proven it can travel, defend, and stay patient tends to be the one you want when the spread is built more on the 11-1-0 headline than the deeper efficiency picture. As our first pick for this matchup, the Villanova Wildcats to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. A number right around 130 is basically the market asking, are you sure these two are not about to surprise everyone and turn this into a track meet? Everything about their profiles, both on the surface and under the hood, leans the other way, and this does not look like a game that wants to breathe fast. Villanova is a funny kind of high-scoring team. On paper, they live around 80 points per night, which sounds like an over-squad, but they reach that number by squeezing the clock, running layered half-court sets, and taking a bunch of threes, not by playing end-to-end chaos. They live near the bottom nationally in tempo, and their opponents are stuck in the high 60s in scoring, so even their big games come packaged in slow motion. It feels more like watching someone work a Rubik's Cube than watching a pinball machine. Seton Hall, meanwhile, is not exactly pushing the gas pedal either. Their scoring lands in the mid-70s, which is solid, but the real heartbeat of the Pirates is on the defensive side. They sit around the national top 15 in defensive efficiency, holding teams to just over 62 a night with serious rim protection and shot blocking numbers that give you pause before you even think about attacking the paint. That kind of profile usually drags totals down all by itself, particularly when both teams are more physical than flashy. Conference games, especially early ones, tend to have a specific flavor too. You get fewer experimental lineups and more let us see who blinks first, half-court grind. Both staffs are completely comfortable letting the last 8 or 10 minutes turn into a defensive clinic instead of a three-point contest. Willard helped define the defensive identity that Seton Hall still leans on, so he knows exactly which pressure points to avoid when he has the ball. Shaheen Holloway, on the other side, has no illusions about what Villanova wants to run in the half-court. That kind of mutual scouting does not usually inflate scores, it clips the easy stuff out of the game. Then you bring in the health context. Villanova's backcourt is already missing a rotation guard long-term after knee surgery, so their perimeter depth is thinner and the rotation naturally tightens. Seton Hall's frontcourt has its own issues, with multiple bigs either out or tagged on the injury report, including their top shot blocker, which can nudge a coach toward managing minutes and avoiding foul trouble instead of playing at breakneck speed. This combination often produces slower, more deliberate possessions, not a free-flowing 80-possession sprint. Add one more sneaky detail. Both of these teams are really good at not turning the ball over. That sounds simple, but it matters a lot for a total like this because it strips away a bunch of cheap transition buckets and quick-hitting threes in early offense. When every trip has to be earned in the half-court, you get more 22-second possessions, more late clock shots, and more final scores that make you double-check the box score because it felt intense but not especially high scoring. So when you stack up two defense-first teams, a slower shared tempo, some key rotation dings that encourage control over chaos, and coaching staffs that are perfectly happy winning a game that lives in the low 60s, the posted total starts to look just a little ambitious. This has the feel of one of those Big East openers that ends with a scoreline where both sides feel like they survived more than they celebrated, and the number on the board finishes slightly above the vibe in the building. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.